I'm here with Cal Millar, former Toronto Star reporter and author of several books, including What is Crime Stoppers? Hi, Cal. Thanks for joining us again.
Thank you very much. Very nice to be here.
So before we begin, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your involvement with Crime Stoppers?
Okay. Basically, I spent my career in the newspaper business, and it was while writing for the Star that I heard about Crime Stoppers forming in Hamilton. At that point, I had never known about Crime Stoppers, although it had been in the United States for a number of years before that, and even had set up in Calgary. But when we heard that Crime Stoppers had come to Hamilton, I went over simply to cover it and write a story and find out what it was all about. So while I was preparing the story, putting it together, I contacted the police chief at the time, it was Chief Jack Marks, and I asked him what he thought of the program. He had heard of it, and he said that with the establishment of the program in Hamilton, they were obviously monitoring it and would look at its effectiveness.
Hamilton was the first program in Ontario then?
Hamilton was the first in Ontario to set up a Crime Stoppers program.
And in Canada?
In Canada, Calgary was the first. They were in 1982, and they have been very successful since that time. In the United States, Crime Stoppers began in 1976. It was a initiative of a gentleman called Greg McAleese. He was a detective.
He was Canadian-born.
He's Canadian-born, born in Picton, Ontario, and he had a homicide. He was working as a detective in the Albuquerque Police Department, and there was a young man by the name of Michael Carmen. He was 19 years old. He was a student working part-time at a gas station, and he absolutely was at a dead end in the investigation to find out who had killed this young boy. And it was a rather savage killing because the perpetrators had gone into the gas bar, ordered him to hand over the cash. It was a very small amount of money. After he handed it over, they shot him point blank with a blast of a shotgun. And before leaving, they reached over and stole cigarettes from the counter behind him. When police arrived, he was still alive, but he was in no condition to give them any details. When they reached the dead end, McAleese was basically looking for any possible area that he could explore, anywhere he could go. He was very concerned about this homicide. He'd made a promise to the mother that they would find the killers, and it was looked like the case was going to become a stale investigation. Prior to joining the police department, while in college, he had been a reporter, a writer, sports writer for the Associated Press. And he knew a little bit about the media, the news business, so he decided that what he would do is use that expertise, pair it with what they do at the police department, but instead of just going out and finding witnesses themselves, recreate the crime and have it televised and ask the public to come forward with tips.
And I know that many programs still do that today.
Exactly the format.
Yeah,
that's
reenactments
right.
Are very popular.
Yeah. Now, he also thought that anonymity would be very important, and that was something that police services, police forces, police departments, give them all the different names they have, want witnesses to go to court. So that was something very different that he did. And the other thing he said, as an added incentive, offer a cash reward. Mm-hmm. So he had $200 available, and he put that money up, which was a lot of money in 1976. Sure. Today it's $1,000 in many places in the United States. It's $2,000 in Canada, and there's varying amounts in different parts of the world. Mm-hmm. However, what happened when Greg set up his line, the tip line, he waited and waited and waited, and there were no calls. And it was really interesting because he thought it was a complete failure. The television station had agreed to do the reenactment. It was perfect, but the phone wasn't ringing. Nobody called. You got a call, hang up. We're testing the line. I mean, this was something new to the community, and there was a great deal of fear and apathy in Albuquerque at that time. And he was basically trying to get over that through the anonymity, through the rewards.
Yeah.
So eventually the phone rings and he gets a call, and it said, sorry, I don't know anything about the murder. But he said, the person said, I don't know if it was male or female, said,
And sorry, just to touch on that, Crime Stoppers doesn't actually record that information,
No, they
whether
don't.
our
That's why
caller
I
is
said.
male or female.
Exactly. And the point is, there's no record of whether
Yeah.
it was. So that's interesting. Anyway, the caller indicated they knew something about a rape or sexual attacks that had occurred in the vicinity of a mall in Albuquerque. So he took that information down and passed that on to detectives. Then he received a call, one single call, about the homicide. And the person provided real, vital information that they were able to follow up on. They sent detectives over, and they found the vehicle, and the vehicle was a vehicle that had been seen in other robberies, which was, they were looking at that area. So they staked it out. Greg went over and was part of the stakeout team. And eventually the two people, and they knew from the evidence that they found that the way the shot had been fired and such, that one person might have been taller than the other, and the way they reached over. So they basically found a button-Jeff pair that they found, and through investigation and through interviews, they confessed to that homicide. They confessed
so the tip worked.
The tip worked. It was very effective. Also, they solved some other crimes.
Yeah.
And
coincidentally.
And the police department were sort of monitoring this because this was something brand new to any
Right.
police department anywhere. Soon Greg was getting phone calls from other law enforcement agencies saying, how does this thing operate?
Yeah.
He found himself traveling all over trying to explain what Crime Stoppers was and what their version of Crime Stoppers was. And that year, because of what he did, he was nominated and received the Police Officer of the Year award for the United States, which was quite a prestigious award. It remains a prestigious award. So it went on a few years, and when there were Crime Stoppers programs in many, many cities across the United States and had moved into Canada, Greg was recognized as one of the top 100 people under 40 who had changed the face of the United States.
Wow.
So, I mean, he's done some tremendous work. And the credit also goes to the people who supported him initially, to the programs coming on board in the different cities. They had enough faith, and they were trying to use the different experimenting.
And that's what it's about, right? Community coming together.
It's a tri-partnership, basically, of the police, the media, and the community.
Yeah.
And they're all working together on a common goal of making the community a lot safer.
And still, to this day, that is the foundation behind Crime Stoppers. For
Yes,
sure.
and the anonymity is the most important point. The reward is not a really strong motivating factor, and many people don't pick up
Yeah.
rewards. But the information coming in with the anonymity of the person doesn't have to go to court, they don't have to reveal their name. That's very important. It protects them from any retribution that criminals may have want to take out against them. So it does.
We mentioned earlier during our hangout on air that anonymity is protected in Canada under Supreme Court case
Yeah,
law.
the Leaper decision came out, and it was a strange, very strange case, actually, because the defendant in the case, who was trafficking in marijuana, his lawyer was attempting to get the name of the caller. Now,
Which
the Crime
happens
Stop-
often.
Yes,
still,
but
to
the
this
Crime
day.
Stoppers office didn't have any information that would actually identify this person, but they were trying to get the tip. They wanted any piece of information
Right.
that Crime Stoppers had obtained. And the Crown said, we're not prepared to give it to you, and so that you won't get it in this case, I'm withdrawing the charges. So you go free, okay? Which was fine. The fellow's free and he got off the charge. His lawyer was adamant that he wanted the tip, so he took it through the courts and he appealed it. And he lost at the Supreme Court of BC, and when the Supreme Court of Canada heard it, he lost again, which meant his client was then facing charges and got convicted. So it was a win-win for Crime Stoppers and a lose-lose for the defendant, because he was already had escaped, and that was it. But Crime Stoppers played a huge part in Canada since its inception here, and we have the same success stories that the United States have. We have successes in England, in the Netherlands, in the Caribbean, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa. It's just expanded around the world, and it's also become a big family. I mean, you were talking on the Hangouts to people that we all know. They're in different parts of the world, different parts of countries, but because we all have a common focus, even if there's language difficulties or language barriers, we're doing the same work.
And earlier in the conversation, we mentioned that you have some involvement in Crime Stoppers. Did you want to share a little bit more about that?
Sure. What happened, and it goes right back to that first little contact with the police chief regarding Crime Stoppers, because after I wrote the story, and the Toronto Police Service looked into the value of having a Crime Stoppers program, they set up a steering committee, and because it's part of the community, the chief asked me if I would be willing to sit on a steering committee to help implement Crime Stoppers. Now, one of the reasons I would be there was a little of my media background too, because the media is one part of the partnership. But more importantly, I'd looked into it. So I had some knowledge of at least how the Crime Stoppers program works in Albuquerque and in Hamilton. And so I said, sure, I'll sit on the steering committee, and the paper thought it was a good idea. And it sort of lasted for 25 plus years. So
still
went from
involved.
Went from the steering committee to the board, and I remained on the board until I retired from the Star, and then we moved to the Burlington area after that, and I got involved with the Crime Stoppers program out there. Now I'm a Crime Stoppers volunteer, so not as deeply involved.
Not a voting board member these days.
Exactly. So I've still stayed involved. Since
you've been retired, tell us what you've been doing.
Well, when I was on the board in Toronto, I thought I would like to write a book on Crime Stoppers. There's an awful lot of interesting stories related to it, but I could never find the theme. It just wasn't there. And what I wanted to do was really collect cases that had been solved by Crime Stoppers and put them together. There was coordinators with the different programs in areas that I spoke to, didn't want to talk a lot about it. Also, there's investigators who don't like to acknowledge that Crime Stoppers played a large part. They would rather they do the job.
And I think another reason too that many programs kind of shy away from taking credit for solving a crime is again to protect the anonymity of the tipster.
And there's some that you can't because you may only have one call, and you don't want to expose them. So I wasn't getting a lot of cooperation from people I was contacting. So I went from there and I left it for a little while. And after I retired, I looked at it again and still had the same resistance. But I thought, what about doing cases that Crime Stoppers are interested in? So you look at that and you go to different programs and They had some break-ins on a street and some cars. Well, the general public's really not interested in the local crime that occurs there. So I focused down onto homicides and wrote a book called Find My Killer.
And we actually have a copy of that here if you wanted to show it.
Which was, thank you, which cataloged more than 300 unsolved homicide cases. And there was actually a lot of interest, and some of the cases were solved. Again, a little bit of pulling teeth. I'd asked people to supply cases that were absolutely cold.
Yeah.
The very first case that got solved was one where detectives actually had a hint of who it was, and they were going to use the book to rattle some chains, and that's what happened. So it was a success, but it wasn't the type of success I was looking for. I was looking for an absolutely cold case that they were having
Just
difficulty
crack it wide
solving.
open.
I had an email the other day from, actually, sorry, it wasn't an email, it was a Twitter, from a woman who said, thank you, the case had just been solved from many years ago. We've just done the Tweet-A-Thon, and we were putting out cases, and there's a case in the book of a woman called Margon Davies from Sarnia, and she was killed in her home. And the interesting part about this is they know who the killer is. They have his DNA. They don't have his name.
Right.
So what they're looking for is a suspect to match the evidence that they have. And I mean, it's just as though he left his fingerprints at the scene. He's left his DNA.
And one good thing that the Australian Crime Stoppers programs are promoting is that each piece of information that's given to Crime Stoppers is a puzzle piece. And each piece, however insignificant it may seem to the tipster, puts the whole case
Exactly.
together.
And investigators, detectives constantly say to the public, don't you determine its value.
Yes.
Let us do that, because you're looking at probably the piece that will put everything together.
Yeah, every little bit of
you know, when you
information
put
helps.
any kind of puzzle together, it's frustrating when you've got the puzzle finished and that last piece is missing. And you've got a nice, wonderful picture of Canada's Parliament buildings. The little flag at the top is missing.
Sure.
Because it's somewhere on the floor and it might have been vacuumed up.
Let's hope not.
And it's frustrating. And that's how frustrating it is to the investigators, because they have a case, the victim can't speak, they're hunting for the evidence, and they know it's there. They know it's there, and somebody has that key, but they can't find it. So
And they might not even know that they have the key.
they don't know. And in fact, the person who provided the information about the killing of Michael Carmen in Albuquerque was 2 blocks away. What they heard was a gunshot. And a little while later, they saw this vehicle. And they put the vehicle to the gunshot after they heard the reenactment. Prior to that, they hadn't even thought about it. They may have generally known that there was a homicide and a robbery and something, but it didn't mean anything to them. When they saw the reenactment, they went, I heard that, and I saw that.
Pieces of
So
the
that
puzzle.
was exactly. And you don't have to be an eyewitness.
Nope.
You just, if you're there and there's something about it. Anyway, the case in Sarnia is sort of interesting because the family members, her sister and niece, live in Glasgow, and
Scotland.
they're very anxious to have this resolved.
Yeah.
So I mean, a murder in Canada has impact on people in another country.
And the great thing about Crime Stoppers is we do have programs all over the world, which is why we've done this global Tweet-A-Thon. And we do connect with each other and work in partnership with other Crime Stoppers agencies. Like I know from experience, we will get tips from other provinces and other countries even, and
Yes.
we work together to solve them together.
Yeah, but if we just move on to DNA for a moment, the former commissioner, a former commissioner of the Ontario Provincial Police, Tom O'Grady, he actually said Crime Stoppers is the 3 basically major things that occurred in the policing community in the last century. He ranks it with DNA and fingerprinting and Crime Stoppers are the innovations of the century for
solving cases,
for helping police.
Yeah.
Now going back to your part about in various parts of the world, Toronto Crime Stoppers worked a number of years ago with police in the United States and elsewhere. They had a child who was being sexually exploited, and they had photographs that were taken and appeared to be in basically an entertainment or a amusement area, and they thought that people might be familiar with this. So what they did, they produced photographs of the background of what was in this picture. And Crime Stopper programs around the world put these out. And somebody in Florida said, that's not an amusement park, that's a hotel. It's a hotel in Orlando that looks like an amusement park right in their lobby. Investigators were able to go there. They knew the time frame because of other evidence in the photograph, and they went through the guest list at the hotel and were able to rescue that girl from the condition she was in and arrest the suspect. And that's how Crime Stoppers, and it's really evolved now from basically the tip line to a crime-fighting organization.
And there's so many ways that you can submit tips to Crime Stoppers.
So many. I mean, there's the normal telephone, and then all the social media ways today.
You can. Well, we don't take tips through social media specifically, but we do accept tips through most Crime Stoppers websites anonymously, and many Crime Stoppers programs also have mobile apps where you can also text your tip. Depending on your program, it'll be a different text number. Yeah.
Now, of course, I'm used to dialing a telephone, nothing else. But the technology has changed so much, and young people, people 35 and under, they have a different attitude about technology. They don't wear watches. Their telephone gives them the time. You wear a special watch. People today, there are more people contacting Crime Stoppers through cyberspace than on the telephone line. So I find that very interesting. But technology has changed so much.
One thing I think that sometimes people are a little cautious as to whether or not their anonymity, is protected online, and it is. In fact, we do not log IP addresses for tips that we receive online.
My understanding is they're not just logged; they don't exist. They're not available for you to log. They're scrubbed. There's technology, and this was developed in the United States. There was a chap by the name of Kevin Anderson who was very instrumental in helping Crime Stoppers with communications. Initially, it was to get everybody connected with the internet, and we had a secure communication link that was actually far more advanced than most police departments had, because we were able to, and this was 25 years ago, and today it's antique considering what's available now. But then we were able to communicate directly with Crime Stopper programs around the world by just typing on the computer. So much has changed, and so many cases have changed. Crime Stoppers now is not just the community crime, but they're looking at global crime and global crime concerns.
Yes.
We have links with Interpol. We have links with the United Nations. Major law enforcement agencies like the RCMP are totally involved. The FBI, Marshals Service, the DNA.
A lot of crimes don't have borders. And I know that right now we're combating, human trafficking, drug trafficking, and these are crimes that affect everybody.
They affect everyone. And one of the problems that people don't realize about human trafficking is that it's going on in your neighborhood.
It is.
If you live in a small community in rural Canada, human trafficking can be occurring there.
Statistically, human trafficking in Canada, 90% of human trafficking victims are Canadian. So it goes on right here at home.
Yeah. And it's not just for prostitution. It's slavery, where you enslave somebody, you bring them over, they work in a
Labor
situation where they have no control over their life. And that's part of human trafficking. People don't realize that.
And today, throughout the Crime Stoppers Global Tweet-A-Thon, our handle at Waterloo Crime, we've been tweeting some human trafficking information about the issue here in Canada and regionally where we are.
Mm-hmm. One of the other things that we got into, and Toronto itself was instrumental, but sadly it involved a case. And about a year after Crime Stoppers started, we had a young girl, and her name was Nicole Moran, and she lived in an apartment building with her parents in Etobicoke. And one day in July, she went downstairs to meet a playmate, and never to be seen again. She left the penthouse apartment, rode the elevator to the lobby. Her mother watched her get on the elevator at the top floor. The elevator doors opened at the ground floor. The playmate doesn't recall seeing the elevator opening or closing, probably because she wasn't paying any attention. But when it got to the ground floor, the doors opened and there was no one in. She waited a while, and then she didn't report that to anyone. She went to the playground thinking she might find her friend, and then nothing was thought. And it wasn't until the afternoon, she went missing around 11 o'clock, and about 4 o'clock, when her mom hadn't had any word from her, she started looking. And unfortunately, police weren't called till almost 6 o'clock, which was 7 hours. And that case remains unsolved.
And how old would Nicole be today?
She'd be close to 40 years old, you know. No, I have a daughter. My daughter's going to be upset with me because my daughter isn't 40. She's it's in her.
We won't talk.
Yeah. But what happened is the police were basically desperate to do anything they could to find Nicole. And Crime Stoppers was a new weapon in their arsenal. So what we did, and I was on the board at that time, and we put out an immediate reward of $1,000. It wasn't up to $1,000, it was $1,000 for her safe return. Yeah. What was very interesting about this whole aspect is the media, who are a partner of Crime Stoppers, jumped on board. And they didn't just cover the story, but what they did was they promoted the story, and they produced giant-sized wanted posters for her safe return. The newspaper boxes, and we're talking about all the papers in the city, put in appeals to find her, announcing the Crime Stoppers reward.
So the community really came together.
The community was mobilized. You would have people out automatically looking, but the media really motivated them because of the amount of effort that the media was putting into this. And it expanded from not only the newspapers, the television stations, the radio stations, but all the commercial operations. We had the billboard companies, the bus shelter companies, all producing.
And that's really key.
It is
that
key,
partnership and that collaboration.
But the bottom line is that had never happened before. So it really wasn't until Crime Stoppers came along that the community and the media were given sort of approval to go further and assist the police and help the police in any way and help the community. They're part of the community. The people are part of the community. And in life, I mean, going right back to Sir Robert Peel, who formed policing, that was his principle. You know, the community of the police of the community. And it worked. Crime Stoppers in Toronto, and the reward went to astronomical amounts. It went over $100,000. Wow. And it became a burden for Crime Stoppers because we don't pay that type of reward. Right. But again, we were caught up in it, and yes, yes, yes. And then there were discussions about large rewards and we shouldn't really have this. So the community reward was separated from the Crime Stoppers reward, and that was it. But then in 1967, I was involved in the disappearance of a girl called Marianne Shewitt. And she was a 10-year-old going home from school and got into a stranger's car and vanished.
You've written a book about all of these
about
cases.
missing, and the Marianne Shewitt case is in there, so is the Nicole Moran. And the reason I did that is because it was an extension of the murder book, and I actually am disappointed in my own background that I didn't do more for missing people cases. We were technologically at a disadvantage because our deadline in the newspaper didn't allow us to make real good appeals, because a missing person who is missing at 5 o'clock in the evening, by the time the paper reaches the doorstep at 7 o'clock in the morning, would be found.
Right.
So the paper really waited.
Didn't highlight them.
They really waited at least a day before they would do anything, and then they would only focus on young missing people, because an adult can disappear.
Right.
The police didn't put the same emphasis. So I was a little concerned and disappointed in my own self that I hadn't done more to help missing people, especially when I consider the work that was done in the Nicole Moran case and then other cases that occurred later on. Sadly, a lot of these cases are still waiting to be solved. We had one, Cecilia Zhang, and sadly they found her body. And Claduz, a little girl called Claduz, her body was found also. So they have tragic endings in some cases.
Mm-hmm.
But then there are opportunities where publicity and the Amber Alert system.
I think one of the important things, though, is that those cases are solved and that people are brought to justice.
Oh, eventually they are,
Yeah.
which is wonderful. Now, there was a case recently in British Columbia, just within the last couple of days, and it's one girl was kidnapped in 1975, abducted in 1975. Her name was Catherine Mary Herbert. She was 14 years old. Sorry, she was 11 years old, and she vanished in 1975.
Mm-hmm.
And there was another girl by the name of Monica Jack, and she disappeared. Both of these cases were in British Columbia in 1978. Now, what's interesting is they're the years that my children were born. These kids never grew up. I've watched my children grow up. My son is coming up to 40, and he's had the opportunity of a lifetime.
Yeah.
In that period of time, almost 40 years, the police in British Columbia have been investigating these two disappearances. Both of them ended in homicides. The bodies of both girls were recovered. One took 17 years to find. The Jack's girl wasn't found for 17 years. Anyway, 4 days ago, in British Columbia, they charged a 67-year-old man from Ontario with their abductions and killings. He's in court on December the 8th. So this is fresh, but that means they've worked all this time to put this person behind bars and identify. They do not stop investigating homicides and missing persons. It goes on and on and on. But going back to the 67 case of Marianne Shewitt, she has never been found, but sadly, because the community wasn't mobilized as much as they are today. Now, they had 17,000 searchers come out and look. It was huge, but the media didn't follow up on the story other than maybe once a year for a few years, say this is the anniversary, or if police had a lead that they were following up, it would be publicized. But what happened is that story was forgotten. And today on the Halton Regional...
Well, we haven't forgotten.
No, we haven't forgotten. That's what I was saying. Today on the Halton Regional Police website She is one of the missing people still listed there with an appeal to call either the investigators or Crime Stoppers if you know anything about it. And when I was writing this book, I spoke to the police chief at the time, and he said, you know what? He said, we're out actually right now investigating some bones that were found in a well in the area where she had vanished. And before the book went to press, I spoke to him, and they turned out to be animal bones. Mm. But they whenever they find something, they will look into it. So it will never be forgotten.
Just coming back to Crime Stoppers, I know that we've touched on 2 of your books. You have a third.
A third book, yes.
What is Crime Stoppers?
Yeah. I'm actually in the process of writing the history book with Greg McAleese. But prior to doing that book, prior to that book coming out, I wanted to do a book to explain to people what Crime Stoppers is. Everybody has heard of Crime Stoppers, but if you ask them what it is, they don't know. Answer. Yeah. Coming into Toronto today on the train, the person sitting in an accompanying seat said they knew of the name. They had no idea what it was. She was a school teacher, which was surprising because she thought, yeah, we have that in our school. But she didn't have a grasp of what Crime Stoppers was or what it did. Now, probably because she didn't need to. I mean, most people are good, upstanding citizens, and for the most part, would never imagine that they would come across any information that would be helpful to solve a crime.
Those are the people that we need.
Exactly.
The good, upstanding citizens
because
to do the right thing.
Yeah, they don't realize that they hold the piece of the puzzle because their mind isn't thinking that was a crime. If they see someone carrying something out of a store, they say, I wonder if they're moving. You know,
right.
Police officer might turn. I wonder what they're up to. So you have different mindsets, and people have to be the eyes and ears of the community and make a little bit of an assessment of what did they see,
right.
And then if they heard that there was a robbery or there was a break-in, there was a theft, there was an incident of any description, was it something that I observed?
Put those pieces together.
Yes, yeah. There's a case in the United States where a young girl who was working at a video store was murdered during a robbery, and small community people drove by, and she was actually at the door, but nobody paid attention, and it wasn't until somebody sort of went to go into the store
right.
that they realized she had been stabbed to death, and police were called, and they're still hunting for that killer. You know, there's so many cases that are unsolved, and as you said, people hold the puzzle, but we haven't got it yet.
Yeah, and we encourage everybody who's watching this to, look into your local Crime Stoppers program, look into any unsolved cases that might be out there, and who knows, you may know something, and you may hold the key to unlocking a mystery.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
And Crime Stoppers is a charity, and
yes.
A lot of people don't understand. They think we're Crime Stoppers is part of the police department, but it's not. It's part of the community, and you can help support it the same way that you can support any other charity by giving cash, and that money is used to operate the program. Mm-hmm. It definitely goes to rewards.
Yes.
We don't accept funding from the government of any type. We don't have ties. In order to remain anonymous, we try to keep it as simple as possible. So if you have any opportunity where people could access the records of Crime Stoppers or something like that, it would expose it to. So there's really very little information that's actually retained by Crime Stoppers regarding its operation, but it does need to promote the program. That number is essential to be known by the public, and you've got to pay the rewards. So
to reiterate, Crime Stoppers programs are run by volunteers. They are nonprofits, and all of the money that we receive is through community donations and fundraising.
Yeah, and it really is on a shoestring because we don't have big buildings, we don't have salaries, we don't have this. We have a lot of people who
Are
contribute their time.
Yeah.
And it's very interesting because this is volunteer month.
It is.
Yeah,
Yes.
so,
and January coming up will be Crime Stoppers Month as well.
Yes, very important. So I think, if the public do come out and support Crime Stoppers, either with donations or with tips, that would be wonderful. And it'll help really protect the community and keep it safe.
Right. So just to, if our viewers here want to pick up your book, where can they get it?
It's Amazon.com. It's available on Amazon. Like I said, we're talking internationally. It's Amazon in the United Kingdom. It's not available on Amazon in Canada, and I can't explain that, but it's not. But it's easy for Canadians to shop at Amazon.com. And actually, I've heard the book arrives within a couple of days once it's ordered, so it's not a problem.
Well, thank you again for being here with us today. Is there anything?
No. Just I'd like to thank you for the opportunity. And support your local Crime Stoppers program. And if you do happen to know anything about crime or anything that will help keep your community safe, please do so. And if you're prepared to volunteer, Crime Stoppers would love to have you.
Thanks again, Cal, and thanks to everybody who's tuned in and to everybody who's participated in today's Global Crime Stoppers Tweet-A-Thon.